Well, I just again want to welcome everyone today. I'm Donna Golub, and I'm the Executive Director here at A Positive Approach to Teen Health, affectionately known as PATH. And this is our first lunch tables for the new school year. So we are excited to be back. Hopefully everyone enjoyed their summer and got to have a little R&R along the way. I had a super busy summer and it went way too fast as far as I'm concerned. And time just seems to be doing that right now, just speeding by. I can't believe it's already, the 1st of October, the end of the week. But we are coming into sweater weather, which is my favorite. So I'm looking forward to fall. I am super excited to have with us today Barb Winters. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about her, and then I'm going to turn it over and let her introduce herself and get started. So, Barb is the author of Sexpectations, Helping the Next Generation Navigate Healthy Relationships. And just a little side note, I've read the book. I was part of her launch team and it was amazing. Um, some little heart tugs along the way, some curl your toes along the way, but overall, just a really good read and something that I think any of us that work with youth or are raising children, or in my case, grandchildren, I've got two teenage grandchildren. We all have youth in our life who are struggling in this crazy world that we're living in. So I strongly recommend the book. She is the mom of a recovered pornography addict. She's a speaker, certified sexual risk avoidance specialist, and founder of Hopeful Mom, supporting parents in an online world. Barb, we welcome you to today's conversation, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate that. I see that there's
Here we go. Good to go.
fantastic. Well, I'm so grateful to be here. Donna and I met this summer, and she kind of just took me in, wrapped me in, and made me one of her own. We have similar jobs, I guess. She's the executive director at a positive path. And then I also work for a facility that's similar to that down here in Central Florida. So it was such a blessing to meet her and have someone else be part of what we're doing. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and we're going to get started on today's presentation. Let me see. Let me know. Can we see that?
Yep.
Is everybody okay? Fantastic. So our chat today is talking with youth about pornography and other online dangers. And I hope that you all came and ready to listen to that. I'm going to start with this quote. When putting porn and hookup culture together, teens not only believe everyone is doing it, but they think everyone is doing it this way. And I'm starting with this quote from my book, Sexpectations, because it helps us understand why we're here today. We live in this casual sex is acceptable society, this hookup culture in which our children are actually watching pornography for their sex education. And those two categories mixed together create the culture that they're growing up in. So that my hope is that by the end of today's session, you understand the dangerous activity today's youth run across online, and you're equipped to have ongoing discussions with the next generation about sex, pornography, and online dangers. And I realize not all of you here are parents, or maybe don't all have parents of preteens or teens, but understanding the culture will help us no matter what, and how, in whatever capacity or role we're in, because most of us bump up against the next generation in one way or another. So before we dive into this topic, I'd like to give you a little bit of background information about me and why I am so passionate about talking with students, talking about parents, talking about leaders in the community about the harms of pornography and other online dangers. And it starts with a personal story. You may have heard Donna say that I am the parent of a recovered pornography addict. So let me give you a little background information to that. About 8 years ago, my husband and I had just moved to Central Florida. We were on a walk, we were taking in our new surroundings. And as we rounded the corner in order to cross a busy street to get back to our home, we could see our son, he was 14 at the time, we could see him standing in our front lawn in hysterics. He was in a panic and he was jumping up and down and he was motioning to us. You could tell that there was something terribly wrong. And his dad and I were thinking that his sister might be lying in a pool of blood, or someone must have broken into the house. We just couldn't fathom what would have him so in such an uproar. Well, when we were finally able to reach him, it was really difficult to understand what he was saying through his wailing. I could hear phrases like watching porn, warning, police coming. And it's kind of odd how you remember these things in your life. I can remember the grass was green and the sky was blue and there were flowers blooming all around me. And yet I was hearing these words that would change the trajectory of my parenting path. And as I stood there in this green grass, blue sky, as I was trying to absorb this information, I felt like I was going to throw up. I was in complete shock. I kept making him repeat things because I wasn't able to comprehend what he was telling me. Well, it turned out that he'd been watching pornography and a bogus warning popped up on his screen stating that if he didn't pay money to the people at the other end, that they were going to send the police and have him arrested. So he confessed because he was afraid of going to jail. And at that moment, and throughout our discussions that came, I had all the feels as a parent. I was angry. I felt guilt. I felt shame. I was in pain and shock, like I said. But thankfully, that's not the end of his story. And that's not the end of my story. But here's the thing. I didn't know that I should be having discussions about pornography and sending and receiving nudes and online grooming. I grew up in an era, and maybe you did too, where we waited until puberty to have the talk, and then we finished it as quickly as possible and let nature take its course, which basically meant that they were learning from their friends and movies, etc. So I did not adjust to the culture. So I'm here to help you understand the culture that our children live in and adapt your conversations about sex and sexuality accordingly, because our children are growing up with screens in their hands, and we need to learn about social media before allowing them to use it. We need to ask our children questions about their friends and their online activity. We need to figure out their jargon and get into the world. Well, throughout this process, I ended up founding Hopeful Mom. I founded it 5 years ago because after helping our son and conducting some research, I ran across some statistics stating that most children will see pornography before age 18. And that blew my mind. And I had this thought. If a high percentage of children have seen pornography, have searched for pornography, or are watching it on a regular basis, then a high percentage of parents have children who have seen it, search for it, or watch it on a regular basis. Therefore, there's more of us out there than we care to admit or want to imagine. But it's difficult to discuss. How do you start that conversation? It's not like I could turn to my best friend over coffee and say, Hey, my son's watching porn. How about yours? No, we don't have those conversations. We don't say things like that. Most parents or adults in general aren't talking about the pornography issue that's plaguing our society. And I want to change the climate. I want to offer a safe place to talk about online safety and the damaging effects of social media, gaming, grooming for human trafficking, hookup culture, and pornography. I want parents and grandparents and educators and leaders to know there are others out there who have navigated these choppy waters and we've made it to the other side. So that's what Hopeful Mom is all about. It supports parents, grandparents, educators, leaders. I like to say I offer virtual hugs to people who have been where I've been and they feel hurt and they feel hopeless. I also offer practical advice and support. So since starting Hopeful Mom, I've become a certified sexual risk avoidance specialist and a certified mental health coach. I'm the lead facilitator at a nonprofit in Central Florida called E3 Family Solutions, which again is very similar to a positive approach to teen health. And we go into schools, we talk with 8th and 9th graders about avoiding risky behaviors and making healthy choices. And as Donna mentioned, I most recently wrote a faith-based book titled Sexpectations: Helping the Next Generation Navigate Healthy Relationships. And this book is a resource for parents and educators and leaders. And you can find more about the book and about me at hopefulmom.net. You can also contact me at hopefulmom619@gmail.com. I love hearing from people. I love hearing their stories. Again, I like to wrap my virtual arms around them, give them hugs. And at the end of my presentation, I'm excited to let you know how you can get a free PDF of the very first chapter of the book. So stay tuned for that information. Well, now all 4 of my kiddos are adults making it on their own. Our youngest, who is our only daughter, is she turns 21 in a few weeks. I feel so old. And she's attending college full time, but even she and I continue to have these sensitive conversations. And I'm so grateful we do, because she's actually had some issues with her roommates who were participating in these very activities that she and I have been discussing in depth for the past 5 years or so of her life. Okay, so before we hit the topic, I have a question to ask you, and I want you to go ahead and put your answer in the chat for me. What fears keep you from having conversations about sex, pornography, and sending nudes? So if you have an answer to that, go ahead and put it in the chat if you're willing and you're brave enough. What fears keep you from having conversations about sex, pornography, and sending nudes? And I'm not going to be able to read the chat. If anything comes up, Donna, would you be willing to read those out?
Yeah, I'm looking.
Okay, fantastic. So I didn't prep you ahead of time. So maybe you're like, I don't know. Maybe you don't have any fears. Who knows?
The fear of creating a thought that wasn't already there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that one comes up a lot, and I will address that.
I fear my son's answers or what he has already seen.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a
Parents having issues with talking about porn, not knowing how to answer a question.
Okay, those are all great fears. So, yeah, and these are all things I've heard before. So, hopefully, as we continue our time together, we're going to be able to abate those fears, because we can't allow fears to stop us. Ignoring or pretending the problem doesn't exist won't protect the next generation. Children as young as 4 or 5 are exposed to pornography for the very first time. So let me repeat that, because I hear it often in my circles that I run around in, and parents tell me this. Children as young as 4 or 5 are exposed for the first time. In a recent study conducted by Common Sense Media, they reported that most teens have consumed pornography. Most teens. All right. So we can't say, oh, not my kid, because more than likely it is, or it's going to be. And 58% of them stumbled onto it by accident. That means your child, your 7, your 8 or 9-year-old child or grandchild, or some child under your influence can be on the internet for whatever reason. They're playing a game, they're watching a YouTube video, they're doing research for school, you name it, and they unintentionally find a pornographic video. Now, besides finding it accidentally, children are typically exposed to porn 2 other ways. They're curious, right? Those kiddos are so curious, and we should know that because we were curious at their age too. And they do a Google search, of course, because what do we do when we need answers? We Google it. They've seen us do it over and over. So they might just want to figure out, hey, what's this sex thing all about? So they innocently type sex into their search box. And instead of getting a clinical explanation, they get a video of sex acts. And it's becoming more common for a friend to show them. So parents have told me that their children had friends show them pornography at sporting events, on the playground, and even while both parents were in the same room with their children. The porn industry targets youth, so they are preying on our children because they know that if someone gets hooked early, that person will be a lifetime consumer. And their goal is to make money, period, no matter who gets hurt. The pornography industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I've seen numbers ranging from $6 billion all the way up to $97 billion, with 13 in the US alone. Pornography is highly addictive. There is evidence that an unhealthy brain addicted to pornography looks as bad as a brain addicted to drugs. It changes how a person feels about themselves. They can feel shame and guilt, but if they're addicted, they can't walk away. So that adds to the shame and the guilt. And the shame and the guilt then keeps them from seeking help. So in addition to finding porn, social media, gaming, and other online interactions also lead to depression, anxiety, and anxiousness. Our kids are confused and they're lost. They feel isolated and lonely. The amount of peer pressure, I can't express how much peer pressure they feel in order to fit in or to appear normal. It's insurmountable. And this leads to participation in activities that they might not otherwise choose. So many middle schoolers are now sending and receiving nudes without thinking that there's anything wrong with this behavior. And because of their insecurities and their desire to belong, because we all have that innate desire to belong, they are vulnerable and they're more susceptible to online predators who use personal messaging to lure children into human trafficking. So I want to touch on that for a moment. You may have watched Sound of Freedom. I know that's a highly watched movie now. And you possibly learned through that movie that the human trafficking industry is a $150 billion industry. And while the movie showed one way that children are trafficked in the world, that's not typically how it happens here in the United States. So here in your neighborhoods, in my neighborhoods, it is happening in our neighborhoods. Predators use subtle approaches, building a relationship and trust with the child or the child's family. So I am assuming that if you're on social media, that you have probably experienced this. You receive a friend request from someone you do not actually know in person. And, you know, if you're brave enough, you go ahead and let them friend you or be a part of your group. And then they send you a personal message, right? And it's all of a sudden you could be interacting with someone that you've never actually met in person before. Now, that is actually one way that the grooming process begins, and that's something we need to be very cautious of. And that's typical for kids, right? So they're on their social media, someone friends them, sure, go ahead, and then they start this personal messaging back and forth. So let me talk a little bit about the grooming process for human trafficking. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because that's not the bulk of our discussion here, but I think it's helpful for us to understand, again, all these online dangers that our children are running across. So the first thing that a predator does is they target a victim by identifying some sort of vulnerability. So that could be just flat out insecurity that they have. It could be something like living in poverty or being bullied, any of those types of things. Then they gain trust and information, and this is how they begin to recruit them. So again, it's very subtle. They ask questions, and it might not be where do you live, but based on the question, they can kind of deduce where they live, etc. And then they meet a need. So based on the information that they collect, they fill either a perceived need, like this belonging, or feeling loved or validated. They'll say, you can trust me, you belong here, something like that. Or they give an actual need. They might give them food, or even something that they think they need, like a phone. I've heard of predators giving away iPhones. Or they could start giving them something that they would be addicted to, like drugs. And after they meet this need, then they isolate them. So this is how they begin to subtly separate them from family and friends, which makes it very difficult for the victim to get help. And it also makes it easier for the victim to walk away from the life that they know. It's at that point then that they begin to exploit. Okay, this is the step where the predator traffics the victim. And this whole process can be very subtle. So it's one slow step at a time. And once the victim gets to this point, they don't think that they are being trafficked. Most people coming out of trafficking, and specifically sex trafficking, do not think, oh, I'm being trafficked. Instead, they believe that they made the decision themselves because it was such a manipulative event that they believe that they had been making this choice. And then lastly, they maintain control. Now, this might include physical abuse, but not always. This could be manipulation or sextortion, something like that, keeping the victim dependent on them through drugs and or threats. So when I'm in the classroom, I'm always sure to make this point. This is very important for us to understand. Human trafficking fuels pornography, and pornography fuels human trafficking. If it weren't for the demand for trafficking or porn, the other wouldn't rise to the top so much. And human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world right now. Okay, well, I have spit a lot of information at you. All these issues are societal issues. I want you to know that. And I also want everyone to understand all these issues, because any of us can help the next generation know the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship. So now that we understand the dangers, how do we have these conversations? Because that's what you're here for, right? You're like, well, okay, you've given me all this very depressing news, but what can I do about it? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, I want to say that we want to start the conversation as early as possible. Now, we might not think it's necessary to talk to our little ones, our 3, 4, 5-year-olds, but a mom that I know told me that her 4-year-old saw a pornographic video. And here's how that happened. Mom brought up a child's video on YouTube and handed the device to her child to watch it. When that video ended, another video, a pornographic one, came up on the screen automatically. Now, thankfully, this 4-year-old knew enough to bring the device to mom and show her what was going on. And we're grateful for that. And that's why we need to be talking to our little ones. I used to think that talking to a 5-year-old about sexuality and seeing bad things online would be difficult. But now I'm convinced that the earlier we start, the easier it is. It's kind of like warning our children not to touch the stove or not to run into the street. We caution them about these dangerous situations to keep them from harm because we want to protect them. Well, when we talk about it in that manner, this type of warning comes naturally. And because our children trust us and view us as the expert on all things that have to do with life, they soak up our words of wisdom. Now, I do have some resources on my resource page at hopefulmom.net. So if you have a 3 to 7-year-old and you're like, wow, how do I, what can I do here? I would suggest the book Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. And again, that's on my resource page. Now, typically these conversations with little ones are only going to take place between a child and someone in their immediate family. So if you're here going, well, I don't have kids that age, or I don't have grandchildren that age, yeah, you're probably not going to be the one to broach that conversation, but it's also good for us to understand how to take care of that. We want to make sure we understand how to broach them if they come to us. So let's look at the 7 to 11 range. So what if the youth in your influence are more in the 7 to 11 age range, and you haven't already brought up this pornography conversation yet? Some parents I've talked with think that this age is too young. So here's some of those fears that we have, right? It's too young. That would be awkward. Some parents are saying, well, they're waiting for the right time. And some are concerned that if they broach the subject, it's going to cause their child to search for pornography. And we heard that earlier already, right? That is a main concern. And it's legitimate. All these concerns or fears are legitimate. But let me propose that we want to be the first ones to use these words and talk about these awkward subjects, these sensitive conversations, because we want them to continue to see us as the expert, the one that they can come to and talk about anything with, especially these hard topics. And we want them to know that we aren't afraid to talk about it. This is a critical age. This is the time where they still trust you and they still listen to your advice. But their thoughts and their beliefs are starting to be shaped by their peers in society. They're starting to understand social media, and they're being influenced by the media in some form or another. And as I said earlier, some kids as early as age 10 or 11 are already starting to send and receive nudes. And again, they don't understand the danger in that. And we are, just to let you know, when I'm in the classroom and I'm talking with students about sending and receiving nudes, I am always sure to let them know that this is actually illegal. They can get in trouble for distribution of or possession of child pornography, or CSAM is what they're starting to call it now. So again, we want to be aware of the dangers and even the legalities of it, because sometimes just saying that to our kids makes them stop and think before they do anything rash. Now, in this preteen stage, they are curious. And again, we need to understand that. Curiosity, right? And that's not a bad thing. It's fantastic that they're curious. But pornography is easily accessible. It is at their fingertips. The average age of first exposure to porn is between 8 and 12. So we want to communicate with them and make it clear that they are not going to get in trouble if they see a pornographic image or video. However, it's important for them to tell a trusted adult if they stumble across it, or if a friend shows them, or even if they search for it. And then the hard part for us, when they come and let us know, We need to not be shocked. We need to not blame. We need to not shame. And that's hard to do. I understand, because I've been there and I didn't handle it well. But that's why we're here, right? To have this discussion so that we can understand how to respond. So we now know that they are likely to be exposed during this time. So it's our job to be proactive rather than reactive. And when we discuss this, we want to use appropriate terminology based on where the child is developmentally. However, I would like to let you know that you want to introduce the word pornography earlier rather than later, because we don't want them to hear it from their peers before they hear it from us. So to prepare for that first conversation, educate yourself on the harms of pornography. So I'm going to give you some harms here. It's selfish. It's violent. It's aggressive. It's demoralizing. It's objectifying. And it's distorted and unrealistic. Now, I don't know if you've heard anything about today's pornography, but it is not your father's or your grandfather's Playboy. It's nothing like that. It's very aggressive and violent. So we want to make sure our children understand that, because if they run across it and they don't understand that this is not realistic, they think that this is the real deal. This is how it's supposed to happen, because an 8 or a 10 or a 12-year-old brain doesn't know any different. And they don't know that it's unrealistic. And then they repeat what they see. It isolates us from others. So porn is something that will isolate us from the masses, especially when they start feeling blame or guilt and shame. It is addictive, as I've mentioned, and it ruins relationships and families. And I think just understanding these harms ourselves can help us answer some questions as they come up with our kiddos. As conversations progress, don't forget to talk about the benefits of sex within the confines of a healthy relationship. So again, we're going to talk about having ongoing conversations, but I want you to understand that if we only talk about the dangers, then we're not giving the full picture. We want to also talk about the benefits of it. So it's selfless. There is give and take, and both parties should be enjoying it. Okay, because a lot of people see the pornography, they see the violence, they see the aggressive acts, and then they get in the middle of a sexual act themselves, and they think they're supposed to like what's happening, and they don't, because it's wrong, and they can't figure that out. So we want to let them know both parties should enjoy it. It's consensual, it's mutually respectful. It actually is meant for two people to bond with each other and enhance the relationship. So again, communicate to them that we want them and desire for them to have a healthy, thriving sex life someday, in the right circumstances, with the right person, when they're ready. And that's the key. So talk about it in a positive light. So let me give you a few communication tips here. We want to have conversations about porn and social media dangers and the negative effects of hookup culture over time, rather than all at once. So we want to look for teachable moments as you do life together. So I just recently heard Chris McKenna of Protect Young Eyes. He's very well known in the circles of anti-porn. And he said that we should have 10 under 10. So what he means by that is we should have 10 conversations before the age 10. We just want to make sure, but it's not like sit down serious. Instead, it's looking for teachable moments as you do life together, right? So in the preteen years, our kids are experiencing so many changes. They're experiencing them physically, emotionally, relationally, right? And kids benefit immensely when we talk with them matter-of-factly about all these changes and what they should be expecting using correct anatomical terminology. So, what if you've never said these words out loud before? What if you've never said pornography or masturbation or talked about their body parts? What if you've never said sex or talked with your children about these things? And you might choke on the words as they're leaving your mouth. That's kind of where I was. I hadn't talked about these things. And if I did, I kind of used whispering tones and put my head down because I was like, oh my goodness, right? So you're not alone if that's you, but here's my advice. Practice. Stand in front of a mirror, look yourself in the eyes and say pornography until it feels a bit more comfortable. Then swallow hard and jump right in. Is it going to be awkward? Yeah, maybe it will be once or twice, but you get over the awkwardness as you talk about it. So again, it might be strange the first time or two you bring it up, but it gets easier. Trust me, it has gotten easier and easier for me as I've talked about it. You can do this. I know you can. You have got this. So when we have these discussions, pay attention to your body language and your tone of voice, okay? Because really, it doesn't always matter what we say. It's more how we say it with our kiddos. If you aren't alarmed and you're calm in your demeanor, then your child's not going to be alarmed either, right? And they'll know that mom or dad or grandma or whoever trusted adult is willing to have these conversations, and they'll come to us later. As you're talking with them about all these things, remind them they are special, they are unique, they are priceless. And because they are one of a kind, they can say no to harmful behavior. As you're talking with them, say, I love you out loud often. Now, look, we think that our children or the children in our influence understand and already know that we love them. But we want those in our lives to say it out loud often. So I think we need to often tell our kids, I love you out loud, especially when they've hurt us, especially when they've misbehaved. Remind them that your love is not conditional, right? Let them know you'll always love them and you will always be there for them, even when they make poor choices or get caught up in negative behaviors. So tell them you're on your side, that you are for them. And this is one thing that I think I did okay at in that first conversation when we found our son on the lawn in hysterics. At the end of that conversation, which, you know, there were so many things that I did wrong and I probably would do differently if I could. But at the end of the conversation, we actually sat down, my husband and I, next to my son. We sat next to him. I put my arm around him and I told him, we are on your side. We are for you. We want you to succeed in life. So whatever comes after this conversation, whatever boundaries we put in place, whatever things we do in order to try and fix this mess, it's not because we don't like you. It's because we love you. And it's our job to take care of you and protect you. And we are for you. We want you to succeed, right? Our kids are learning how to navigate life by trying new things on their own. It's that risk-taking thing, and that's positive. They need to go through that in order to grow, in order to mature, and they want to learn and try new things without our help. So just in everyday life, as they're making decisions, let them know that trying and failing is okay. So let me just give you a crazy, weird example. If by chance they're in the kitchen and they're trying to make a cake by themselves, it might not turn out well, right? But that's okay. So let them know, yeah, you tried that, you failed. It's a learning experience. That's all right. Be willing to talk about times where you have tried and failed. Express to them how those moments helped you improve. And we can do that in our circles. It doesn't have to just be with our own kids, right? We talk about these moments that have grown us, that have helped us improve because we tried something and we failed. Talk about times where you made unhealthy choices and the resulting negative consequences. Now, I'm not saying to go into detail. We don't need to do that. They don't need to know specifics about our lives, but we can give them an overall understanding of, yeah, when I was young, I made some poor choices, and here's what happened because of it. Remind them that each of us makes mistakes and accidentally hurts others, but our love is not dependent on their behavior. Again, creating that safe space as you're doing life together so they know you're always available, especially when they fail or falter. When we focus on maintaining a strong relationship, one that includes connection, bonding, mutuality, and trust, we foster an environment in which our teens feel comfortable talking about anything and everything. And that's a quote again from my book, Sexpectations. So what are some common conversation starters? Because I get that question a lot. Well, how do I start this conversation? You're giving me a lot of broad information, but what do I say? So I recommend asking an open-ended question. And again, remember, it's not the specifics of the words we use so much as our demeanor and how we're approaching it, right? We want to make sure they understand they're not in trouble and that we want to help them. So we could, in our open-ended questions, maybe say, have you ever heard your friends talk about the word pornography? Do you know what that word might be? Or do you know what it means? A follow-up question might be, well, what would you do if a friend shows you a pornographic image? Let them talk, give them some space to tell you about their life. Try not to show any shock on your face. If they tell you, start disclosing to you what has actually happened in their life. Again, we want to be there to help them understand they're not going to get in trouble because it's not their fault. They're victims. The pornography industry is preying on them. You can use me as an excuse. I've said this a lot, and I'll let you guys use me. I was at this webinar today, and the subject was the dangers of pornography. And I didn't realize I should be talking with you about that. Let's have a conversation. What happens in your world? What do you know about this word, right? And then the role playing. So if a friend shows you an image, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? Let's role play a little bit together. Let's pretend I'm your friend. Hey, so-and-so, come over here, look at this. And they got their phone in their hand. What are you going to do? Ask them, or maybe suggest to them that they could ask the friend, what are you going to show me, before they actually look at the friend's phone. Help them learn to say no. And again, that peer pressure is so high. So we want to help them know and understand that saying no is perfectly acceptable. So remember to adapt the questions depending on your child's maturity level and the responses that you get. And during follow-up discussions, you can talk about how porn affects the brain and how it can be addicting. You can discuss how it disrupts the ability to bond with people in real life and ruins marriages and families. Okay, so let's talk about preteens and teens for a minute. We're going to jump into a little bit older age bracket here, and I want to touch on brain science. So put in the chat for me what you think the answer is to this question. Some of you who work in this field probably already know. At what age is the brain fully developed? Anybody know? At what age is the brain fully developed?
25, 26, 25, 25, 24.
Yeah,
25.
You guys already know. You're fantastic. The brain is not actually fully developed in the mid-20s, until mid-20s. And again, it depends on gender, but 25 is what we say is the average. And the last portion to develop is the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part that controls logic and reasoning. That's the portion of the brain that understands cause and effect. So in the teen years, that prefrontal cortex is still developing, and it's battling the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's instinctual and pleasure seeking. So as the brain develops, the decisions that teens make form grooves or neural pathways in the brain. And each time they make a particular choice, that groove becomes deeper. So if they continue to make the same choice over and over, that groove deepens. And the deeper the groove, the more difficult it is then to change. So if they choose to listen to the intelligent, logical, sensible part of the brain, that same choice becomes easier in the future. However, if they cave into the pleasure-seeking part, the irrational part, the amygdala, making choices solely based on instant gratification, those same choices become easier and easier until they're automatic. And that's how habits form that turn into addictions. So one other important note, because we are created to bond or make connections, those who watch pornography are releasing chemicals in their brain, which creates a bond or a connection with the image on the screen. And that's why they crave it, why they come back over and over. The more they watch, the more they want. And over time, they need more extreme content, even violent, to get that same high. Which leads to unrealistic expectations of real life sex. So that's why people who go into real life situations can't perform as well. They don't understand. Well, you've got these unrealistic expectations, and you've bonded with screens. Thankfully, the good news is that the brain is neuroplastic, which means it's pliable. So when we strengthen that prefrontal cortex by resisting temptation and making healthy choices, new pathways form, and the unhealthy pathways become less appealing. Why is this helpful to know? Why are we talking about brain science? Well, because when we understand it, we can help our preteens and teens strengthen their prefrontal cortex. Each time they choose to walk away from a tempting situation, they're strengthening that prefrontal cortex and forming healthy pathways in their brain, which makes it easier to say no the next time. Now, I wish I had known all of this the day that I encountered my son on our front lawn in hysterics. Until porn invaded our home, I actually felt disgust for people who use pornography. I saw them as perverted and monstrous. So I couldn't figure out how to view my son. Was he a monster? And after researching the cause of porn use and understanding what it does to the brain, I realized the pervasiveness of pornography and the pull that it has on our children. And my perspective changed. I began to see him as a victim of the porn industry, and a victim of a society that says it's okay to watch pornography, and a society that doesn't fully grasp how porn is affecting all of us. Later, as I continued to walk with my son on his path to freedom, a new perspective birthed. My view of him morphed from monster to victim to potential victor. And that's what I want you to remember. That's what I want you to walk away today with. If you learn of a youth in your life who has been watching pornography, remember they are not a monster. They're victims. But more importantly, they're potential victors. So let me finish out this story about my son. After that first day that we learned of his pornography use, we did put some protections in place, like filters and passcodes. And I highly recommend filters and parental controls and passcodes. And I have lots of recommendations on my resource page at hopefulmom.net. But unbeknownst to us, he went back to his habit pretty quickly. And a year and a half later, when he was 16, he came to us again, and he confessed he had not stopped. Now, at that point, he disclosed how involved he really was, and he asked us to further lock down things because he was ready to quit. his real recovery became at that point. And I'm telling you this because at some point, as our kids mature, especially as they are in their teens and later teens, they need to make their own choices. It's our job to educate them for sure. It's our job to protect them and to guide them toward healthy choices. Of course, we're going to put those guardrails up. We're going to put those boundaries in place, but we can't change them. We can't make their decisions for them. So when we're having discussions with older children, especially, ask for their input. You might say, how can I best protect you from seeing unwanted images? Where and when are the times that you might feel tempted? Are there boundaries we can set as a family that would make you feel safer? When we make decisions together, your child is more apt to adhere to them. And my son, I'm happy to report he's walking in freedom from his porn struggles. If we want to affect the lives of the next generation, we must see them as amazing yet complicated individuals. They will make mistakes. Their emotions will dictate their behaviors at times, just like mine do. But that does not mean that they are bad people. They need us to be that safe landing place, the ones who have their backs, even when they make unhealthy choices. So when you interact with them, envision their future. Our goal is to help them reach their full potential, to thrive and be positive forces in the world. Our precious children have a purpose. They have goals and they have dreams, and we want to encourage them to pursue those. And we do that by communicating to them that they're special and unique and one of a kind. They're priceless, and so are you. So keep talking, because only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the power of our light. And that is a quote from Brené Brown. So as we conclude here, I'm going to put this QR code on the screen. I promised you that I would let you know how you could get a free chapter of my book. So what I want you to do is get out your phone right now and open up your camera and hold it up to the screen. That QR code is going to take you to my website. When you subscribe at Hopeful Mom in the next 24 hours, you're going to get 3 gifts from me. 2 of them are going to come in a thank you email right away. So you're going to get 7 steps after your child sees porn, and you're going to get personal reflection and group discussion questions to use with the book. And then you're going to get another email from me that gives you a PDF to the first chapter of Sexpectations, along with a 50% off code to purchase the book directly from Leafwood Publishers. And a shout out to them because they are offering this to you today. So go ahead and go over there, use that QR code. And I that's the end of my discussion here. I really want to thank Donna. I really appreciate the fact that she allowed me to come in here today and chat with you all about how to have these difficult conversations. I don't know if we want to go into Q&A, Donna.
Yeah, I think that we will go ahead and open the conversation. If you have any questions, we'll do that for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll take a short break as we go into lunch tables. For those of you who haven't been part of our webinars before, what we're going to do is go into breakout rooms for about a half an hour where you have an opportunity to just talk about what you heard today, what your takeaways are, how this relates to you personally and maybe professionally. And then we come back together in about 25 minutes or 30 minutes and kind of just do some report backs table by table, what you learned, what your takeaway was, maybe some new questions that you have for Barb that came out of your conversations. So she will be around to be able to answer those questions at the end. She has the opportunity to kind of pop in and out of rooms if she wants, or she may just join one room. I'm not sure how she'll choose to do that. But so let's go ahead and just take quick questions or comments, feedback right now, and then we'll take just a short break. You guys can use the restroom, grab another cup of coffee, whatever you need to do while I arrange the breakout rooms. So any questions, you can put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and just ask Barb whatever you've got on your mind. Don't be shy. Questions, comments?
They
Did a
know it
good job,
all.
Barb. It was a lot of great information. I think they're probably like me, kind of just processing. And I read the book and I'm still processing. And this whole topic touched our family with my son when he was a teen. And you know what it started with? It started with underwear commercial advertisements that came in the newspaper. Most people don't get newspapers today, but then especially the Sunday paper would have all the ads in there, and we found under his mattress, typical story, right? We found tucked under his mattress a bunch of like the bra and panties, and that's what started it for him.
And
Curiosity and
yeah, and the crazy thing is you can't predict who's going to find them curious and go back over and over and who is not, right? So,
right.
I mean, I was exposed as a little girl, but I was like, whatever. Like that
Yeah.
didn't affect me. And by the way, it is a girl issue too. So we tend to lump this into a boy problem, and we still hear the boys will be boys, which, we can't really go there anymore either. But women also struggle with this. So another part of the stigma, and that adds an extra layer if there's a woman involved. There's already shame and guilt associated with watching pornography, but then when they hear that this is a boy problem, that just adds another layer of shame and guilt. Yeah.
Barb, this is Peggy Cowan from the New Jersey Physicians Advisory Group. I greatly appreciate your talk because you've laid out, here's the steps to do it. It's really not, it's scarier if you don't do it. So thank you very much. This was very helpful. It really, really was. I will share this information broadly.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
So if you registered for today's training, you'll get an email with a link to the recording, and please do share. Word of mouth and conversations between frontline staff and between other parents and support groups. I know I mentor a couple of ladies, actually, to Barb's point, at my church, who struggle with this very topic. And I'm going to let them watch it just so they know they're not alone, because oftentimes I think they just feel like there's nobody they can talk to. And am I the only one who's stuck? Because they want out, they recognize that it's a problem. So there's a chat. Thanks for the rich sharing. Oh, it is 1 a.m. over here. Jeffrey, you're like over the sea. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take just a 5-minute break. When you come back from the break, you'll see that you're divided into breakout rooms. And again, the idea of the breakout rooms is just talk about what you heard today, what your takeaways are, how you might be able to use this information. If you have questions or you want to share something about your story, I would just ask that we be considerate. Don't take up the whole amount of time. This is not really meant to be any kind of a counseling session or anything like that. So, step up and step back when appropriate. Make sure everyone in your group has an opportunity to share. So 5-minute break. When you come back, you'll be asked to join a breakout room. I'll give you about 25 minutes in that breakout room, and then we'll come back together and do some report outs. All right. Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome back. And I know we lost a few folks during the lunch tables. We always do. They come for the meat of it. And I think especially today, I'm wondering because it's not a comfortable conversation, right? A topic that we're not used to talking about, especially with peers and not people that we know, not a super like icebreaker conversation, right? To just for networking. So for those of you who stayed, I appreciate your time and your willingness to start having the conversation because, you know, I've been working around suicide prevention for a while now. And there was such a stigma that came with that word. And what I've seen in the last 10 years that I've been working in that field is that it's becoming a more comfortable conversation. The word isn't as taboo as it used to be. And I think the more we have conversations like this one around what can be uncomfortable and difficult topics, the more comfortable it becomes, and then the more light we can shine on the subject, right? So pornography is not a comfortable conversation. And there's a lot of opinions and myth, quite frankly, about what it is and what it isn't. And so I appreciate those of you who had the time and the courage to stick it out. I thank you for that. I know Barb got to bounce between the rooms a little bit. As people dwindled, I kind of moved and shifted. So you may have come in and out of some conversations, but I'd really like for anyone who's willing to kind of share what your takeaway was. What did you learn today and how do you think you'll use it? Anyone like to start that conversation? Barb, was
Um,
there anything you heard? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Coral.
I was gonna say I'll probably, I think this will be great to add in. We've already got a for positive potential. We have a class that's going to go into the sexting and talk a little bit about pornography, and we really are going to be using some of that curriculum in our work with our older students and our high school students as well. Just to kind of bring up this subject, we don't touch on it for a long time, but just really getting it introduced that it can be negative, the negative effects on their brains, the legal ramifications that they might feel. So I think that this was definitely helpful to get into what are those things that we should really talk on when we're opening this discussion in classrooms.
Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Barb, what did you hear while you were in your rooms that maybe was something you hadn't heard or not talked about before? Or what was there any common themes, misconceptions, fears?
Well, one of the questions that came up, which I had not thought about, was when I mentioned that we should say "I love you" out loud to our kids a lot. One of the gals has interacted with someone from a different culture where it's not commonplace to say "I love you." However, they express that love differently. And so it made me think, okay, should I revamp a little bit even how I say that? Because the most important part of that is that your child does know that you love them, however you express that. And I do talk about the love languages in the book in the various ways, but it's a cultural thing too, right? As long as there's not that coldness, and we are leaning into the relationship, and we have some good contact with them where they understand that we love them. It's not necessarily our words, because even there are times where we say "I love you," but it's so like you're kind of backing up even as you're saying it, and our body language is saying something different than our words are. So again, it's not always the words, it's our demeanor and how we're leaning into the relationship. So I really appreciated that comment.
Yeah, we definitely have to be aware of the environment, know your audience, right? Even when your audience is even when your audience is your child, know them. What makes them feel valued? What makes them feel loved? And use that, right? That's important. So important. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? We're quickly coming to the end of our time today. So I want to be respectful of that.
I just really appreciated the point about I brought it up in my break room, but the prefrontal cortex, like gaining strength. Every no is kind of a building block to an easier no. And and I think that's something I'll bring up with my teens is, like, every day has room for strengths, and we often forget that. So,
Thank you, Isaiah, for sharing. Yeah, every no makes the next no easier. It's a
mhm.
very good point. And a lot of our kids, I'm amazed still, we've been doing this work for so long, and some of the kids just don't realize they have that option to say no. They feel
Right.
that so much is put on them and before them, and that they just have to embrace it all, right? So the idea of setting boundaries and learning how to say no is a foreign concept to many of the youth that we work with. So just inviting them to own their space and set those boundaries is important. It's an important part of what we do.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
There was another conversation in a different room about gaming, and we need to be careful there too. So they can interact, they can personal message. And we use, when we're in the classroom, an example of some kids who were trafficked through Discord, and they were boys. So a lot of the kids use Discord to interact and for their gaming. So
Wow.
being mindful, I'm always so grateful for the parents who really go the extra mile to make sure that their kids are in a safe place and that they're interacting with kids their own age and it's not a predator or somebody catfishing them.
There is so much more that we as parents and grandparents, I have my grandkids quite often, and there's so much more that we need to know, right? Because ignorance is not safe for our kids or our grandbabies. We just have to be aware. And as much as we would like to bury our heads in the sand, our grandkids and our children cannot afford for us to do that anymore. We can't just say, not me, not mine, or, well, mine know better. I've taught them better. Because as I think, Barb, you used the phrase, it invades our homes. It invades the devices that we use that we think are just innocent tools of entertainment. It comes into our homes uninvited, and we just need to be aware. Anne Marie, you have something to share? No, I saw you come on camera. I thought maybe you had something. Beautiful smile. Hi. Okay, if there's nothing else, Barb, do you have any other closing thoughts? No, you're good?
I'm
Well,
good.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being with us today. I think it was a really valuable conversation. I know you're getting ready to do some other speaking engagements. I've seen the titles, so I think we'll probably invite you back because I
Awesome.
think you're a wealth of knowledge for our group. So job well done. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to share what happened in your family and allow God to just use that as a tool and a way to communicate with others. Sometimes it can be very hard to be vulnerable and to put that shame and that it would be easier to put the wall and say, no, no, but thank you for your bravery.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Donna.
For those of you who have stuck it out, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We will be back next month. The date is October 25th. Our guest speaker next month is Dr. Michael McGee. He is the Chief of Emergency Services at a hospital here in Northwest Indiana. He is also the founder of Pop on Violence. And he and his organization partner with us to do some juvenile justice grant work. And he's going to be talking with us about the violence that our kids are experiencing, some of it being gang violence, the gun violence, but also just some of the violence that is lesser, but just as important and stressful on our kids. And, you know, we know cyberbullying has taken suicidal ideations to a whole new level. So we got to get a handle on this violence. We've got our kids killing each other and it just needs to stop. So Dr. Michael McGee will be our guest next month. Same time, same place. You'll be getting an email. And again, please, you're going to get like a 5-question survey with this, along with a to let us know how you liked what you heard today. If you have any questions, you can respond there. And then please share. You'll get a link to the video. You can also find it on our website. Just to remind you, hopefulmom.net, if you're interested in getting some of those resources that Barb mentioned. You can also find a lot of those same resources on our positiveteenhealth.org website. So thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you in October. Bye-bye.